Hi there, and welcome to the Self-Awareness Amplified podcast. I am Kirsty Mack.
I am Scott Lieber.
And we are here to talk about the rather large subject of self-awareness. And we will hear us time and time again, because a lot of the courses, programs, and things that we do is all about self-awareness. And you'll hear us say that the greatest leaders that you'll ever work with are those people that are incredibly self-aware.
Always, I find the nicest human beings are also incredibly self-aware, because you can have a conversation about most things with them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of humility there, and they're aware of their strengths, aware of their blind spots, and aware of the things that really gets them going and the things that really don't get them going. And I think they also, as you say, they have those conversations to engender that with other people as well.
Yeah, you can build a lot of trust in a relationship when you have self-awareness.
Yeah.
You can have a conversation that's nice and open. Like you're not your guarded self. You can be your true self around those people, because they're the self-awareness of how to regulate their own approach.
Yeah,
not to bring too much of themselves to that conversation, but allow you to fully be yourself when you're having them as well with them.
So there's a relaxation. Is that the right word? Yeah, relaxation of the ego.
I know I do. I feel certainly more comfortable speaking to people that have more self-awareness, that they're not just choosing to hear things.
Yes.
They're suspending their judgment and really deeply listening to what I want to say. So it's part of self-awareness, but there's a whole lot of other areas. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about our own experiences of our journey through self-awareness, and particularly through our kind of continuous personal and professional development route, and what difference that makes to self-awareness, and maybe talk about a few leaders and examples of people who have done that to incredibly high standards, and hopefully share those ideas with you to help you out.
And I think so. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question.
Go for it.
If you could map out your self-awareness journey.
Ooh, can I draw it?
You can draw it, which would be great for an audio podcast.
Absolutely.
What would be in it? What's on it? Where did it start? What components really got you knowing yourself?
Do you know, you asked me a question in a podcast that we recorded about 6 months ago, and the question you asked me is, when were you first really aware of yourself, that you had choices and options and things that you could do? And I think I answered it as I can remember being in a meeting in my early 20s and not liking the sound and the tone and the tempo of what was going on in that meeting, but not really knowing how to fix it, or how I could be a better version of myself in those meetings to try to get a better outcome. So I sat there and said nothing, but I knew there was something I could do better to try and have more knowledge and more insight to do something with it. I think in years previous to that, I had always been invested in personal development, but not really doing things through choice, but almost through nature's force. It's just allowing things to come their way to me, and hopefully learn things from some more kind of experiential of learning by doing, rather than actually choosing things to actually develop in.
And what did that cause you to choose then after that, in terms of your own person?
I started doing some CIPD, some Chartered Institute qualifications, but the qualification part of it was only one section of it, but just being surrounded by other people who were actually there to talk about being a better version of you and helping you be a better manager, a better leader, a better colleague, a better team worker. Yeah. It's actually opening your mind up to a whole scope of possible opportunities of things that you could actually learn about. And I know you're a massive advocate and a massive reader of books.
Yes.
Pause for that thought. How much Kirsty loves books.
I was just, let's just appreciate the books.
Yeah. If I had a silence to describe how big Kirsty's love of books are, we would just stay silent for the rest of this podcast and never record again. But my route into that level of personal development was quite different, actually. That it was those moments of trying to say, well, I can learn more things from more sources, and becoming, I suppose, even thinking back to then, you would have had obviously internet usage, but it wouldn't be as prevalent by having podcasts and blogs and everything that exists now online. So there's so many more sources now that they had, which I suppose in more traditional routes, when somebody who's 45 now, 20 odd years ago doing that, would have been different routes. It would have been academic papers and studies and research pieces that were written. that you would read continuously to get some form of insight, but some of them weren't the most interactive and engaging to read for my style, because I'm, quite active and quite out there with the way I like to learn things. But I think even just being in the moment and realising you can learn more from every single experience, I think I definitely learned to slow my thought process down, and really engage in the moment of what I was doing and why I was doing it, and making different choices for myself. And I've probably done that to quite an intense level ever since then. So I would say I was probably 21 when I was first really aware that I could actually make better choices for myself in the ways in which I personally develop. But then deliberately more cognitively doing that by choice and actually choosing things that are best suited to my learning style, to my needs and to my preferred growth pathway would have been something I actively was doing from that point forward. But previous to that, it was more through, experience and learning things by doing them, but not necessarily writing stuff down and, really engaging with what you were doing while you were doing it. It was more just by chance, whatever happened to be thrown your way.
Yeah.
What about your own experience?
I think similar in that I was always paying attention, as you just described, always paying attention, because it's easier to see how other people do things.
Yeah.
Because you don't see your own face, do you? So it's easier to see what other people are doing and the things that you really don't like.
Yeah.
So that actually
that's a
was
good point,
that
actually.
was that. Oh, I hope, and then equally when you start getting more into the sort of psychology of things, then you learn that perception is projection, and you're thinking, okay, so I don't like it, but I may possess the capacity to do that, and maybe I had been doing that more than I thought I was doing it. So I'd say paying attention, understanding, and my first route into it on a I was going to say legal sense, that's absolutely not the word, but in a sort of rigid sense was going on a coaching course. So it was kind of like the boom of life coaching and things like that. And I did a coaching course, and I've said to you multiple times that when I did that course on that weekend, it was like a Pringle. Once you pop, you can't stop.
Yeah.
I was like, what? This is, you can have conversations like this, you can use different tools. It was when, Johari's window, using things like the Wheel of Life coaching tools, using those elements that I thought, wow, you can start, and because I'm visual as well, I could map things out. I could get feedback from people. Not that I'm a great fan of receiving the feedback, I'll be honest, but getting feedback from people and really taking it on board and going to the outer edges of yourself to find out others' perception. I think I've gained a lot from others' perception and gaining feedback from them and understanding, because we have an intent, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious, about how we want to come across, but sometimes because other people are wrong, it doesn't come that way.
I was working,
don't mean that.
just a story that connects back into this. I was working with a group a couple of years ago, and it was the start of, it was quite a lot of less experienced team leaders and managers in the room, and they were, I would say quite a number of them are quite early on in their kind of their development pathway around those things, around choices and recognising there's different ways that you can develop. And we invited one of the senior managers into the room to do a speaker slot at the start of the day, to provide an overview of what their personal development journey was and the importance of investment in self. And the first thing that came out of his mouth when he started speaking was, I remember when I did my training, as if to say, well, I did a chunk of that when I was 25, but now I'm a senior manager, I no longer have to do it. And it just completely undermined the next 15 minutes of what came out of his mouth. And when he left the room and walked out, as much as what he said was actually pretty good when he was saying it for the rest of his speech, that one thing he said right at the very start of that conversation completely disengaged the rest of the group, rather, in terms of what he was actually saying. That you could hear mutterings below people's breath when he walked out of the room of some not very pleasant comments, because he just set the tone completely wrong. And it's not something you just do on occasions when you go on a course. If you're listening to this now and you're doing an apprenticeship program, even the apprenticeship itself is one version of personal development and continuous self-awareness and self-development. You're doing it every day. I mean, we do it for our life. It's almost like it's not we just happen to work in an industry that's about personal development, but I still feel quite strongly if my job wasn't in learn development, I think I would be still continually investing in myself
Yeah.
to learn more things, because I always find it just such a fascinating subject of evolution, that you're just learning more about yourself the older you get and the more experience you become. And that's why the subject of emotional intelligence, for example, the more experience you have of life and the more that you've noticed that life happening in front of you, the more emotionally aware you become in those situations. I've came across people that if I asked them to describe what emotional intelligence was, they probably couldn't tell me. But I've actually seen them demonstrate habits of high emotional awareness by saying the right things in the right situation, because they've gathered lots of knowledge from their life experience that they're then able to adapt around others and make the right choices. It's not that they know the definition of what Daniel Goleman suggests as emotional intelligence, although incredibly important, but they've actually recognised those moments in time where they've learned something about themselves and learned about the best thing to say to those others and actually make the right choices for themselves.
So that sort of self-regulation and self-possession, so that they understand what's going on for them, but they've got real empathy towards other human beings, and they pay attention to what is coming through for people. I was speaking to a leader the other day for one of our Brilliant Minds, and he was saying, he said, I'm always looking at the reaction of what I say. I'll say something, but I'll know that I always have to check in on the reaction, because perhaps it's not landed in the right way. So I'm always looking at body language. I'm always looking at what is coming back to me, and I'm always very aware that I'm always going to get more information from the person than just what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah. Likewise, if it's done in a coaching call or you're on a telephone to someone, if you get silence, is either allow that silence to exist, or if the silence continues to exist, is inquire what the silence means.
Yeah.
And what's that person thinking that then produces a different reaction at the other end of that call, rather than just somebody talking. What's the cause of the big space of silence?
Yeah.
What is it you've explored that's interested to explore more with them? Somebody used a phrase the other week I was chatting to about asking somebody great questions when you uncover something that's really interesting. She said, I like to poke the pain to actually just get under the covers of what's the thing that they really can't tell you or don't want to tell you, that you can find out more about yourself. And I think if you can learn about your pain points and your plus points, and really be honest about yourself in terms of what you can learn, that's a good thing for self-development. Self-awareness is not being scared to scare yourself a little bit and try and discover more about yourself is incredibly important, rather than just taking the safe option.
I think I remember when I was with Marks and Spencer's, we did, I think it was Insights we did then. It was a psychometric. Right. So it was the first psychometric I'd done. I was like, this is amazing. When you feel like someone was been following you for a fortnight, going, this is unbelievable, showing it to everyone in my sort of family and friends and going, it's voodoo. But I love that. Was really insightful to give me an idea of, consciously what I was putting out to the world, and how much energy I put into different things. I'm pretty much the same all in, and I've done Insights multiple times since then. It was really interesting to see any changes that came through. So I think profiling tools are really insightful. What I would say with them, and this is my personal opinion, so feel 100% free to reject it, is to hold them lightly and not to hold on to them like an identity.
No.
Because I've been in many organisations where they use their Myers-Briggs as, their email signature. Or I went into one place and they had their Insights colour on a badge. It's like this.
Cultural differences.
This is who I am.
A lot of Scandinavian countries, they use their DISC or their Insights profile and their LinkedIn profile by way of making an introduction easier to them, so you can talk their language. Mm-hmm. Which was by the silence that I'm just hearing down, because it's not a part of doing
so uncomfortable.
But
again, it's just my
I've said
personal
this
thing.
to you before, that I just think it gives you some, the word insight is there in the clue in the statement. It gives you some insight into someone's tendency. It doesn't tell you their whole capability or capacity for greatness and what they can and can't do. It just tells you about the way that they tend to do things.
Yeah.
And I still hear people saying, well, that's because you're a bit blue, or I'm very blue, and using it as an excuse to get around things. I think it's good to understand your tendency and your difference. And I deliver a lot of psychometric different programs, and I'm a fan of them, but I'm not a fan of them in the sense that when people use it to badge
Yeah.
or to pigeonhole, that's what you are, so hence you will do it.
Yeah.
I just think it gives you a better chance of communicating in a way that they're able to hear you better if you're speaking with a tone or a clarity or a style that perhaps gives them a better flavour of, how you best describe situations.
I think it's a
Rather
great
than-
way to find out about other people.
Yeah.
I love when you see other people's, I've done insights or emergenetics or MBTI or whatever abbreviations there are, and then to see how the brain works. If you're doing it as a team, how does that brain work as a team? How
really
do
interesting.
that's really that level of self-awareness plus, and then how to interact with other people and how to bring out the best, and how do you all collectively create an environment that brings out the best in that brain. That's important.
Yeah. I had a group last week we were doing some psychometric work with, and we were just talking about vulnerability as an example, about how open you can be about yourself around others. And there's many different reasons why someone would be vulnerable. Your style's one of them.
Yeah.
So you might say, for example, I can't be vulnerable because, I'm quite direct as a person. I don't like admitting my frailties, but there can also be the fact that I'm new to the team, coupled with that, and I don't know everything well enough to truly share, information into myself. So I just think it gives you a nudge. It gives you an insight and a reflection of how someone may prefer things. But
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be situation specific, depending on whether that's applicable or not.
Yeah.
I was quite interested in the other angle of psychometrics, because a lot of them people I tend to find that they jump at the stuff that they're not good at and look at how they need to adapt into other areas, but rather than how people use the things that they're really strong at and how
Yeah.
they use their strengths to the best of their ability. And I was listening to a podcast last week, and there was a really interesting interview with Marcus Buckingham, who wrote one of the Strength Finder books. I think it was one of the second ones. I can't remember the name of the first one. But anyway, he wrote a book on Discover Your Strengths. And his description of strength I found quite interesting when you talk about personal development and self-awareness. He said a strength isn't just something you're strong at, but something you enjoy and you flourish in. Because the example he gave was, I'm good at interviewing people, but I might not necessarily enjoy it. Or I'm good at, doing spreadsheets, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I enjoy it. And he said, how can you discover more about the strengths, your strengths that you really flourish in? He said, in the way in which he suggested people do it is, if you imagine 15 people in your network and you invited them each to give you a little bit of specific feedback and where they feel you're at your strongest, what's that like? He says, then look through those 15 pieces of feedback and look for the patterns in them that exist to see how many of those things do you recognise that are things that you're both strong at and you flourish in, to really identify what your true strengths are. And then once you know what those are, you can then redeploy those strengths into other areas. So if, for example, you were good at interviewing and you enjoy flourishing in it, and you went into a networking situation that you don't enjoy, could you actually treat that networking situation like an interview and actually interview people rather than having social conversations? Because it's not the thing you're particularly strong at, but the interview is the thing that you are. I just thought it was quite an interesting way to position strengths rather than, just think about them as, Kirsty, you're awesome at this, and this, but you then go, do you know what? There's only one of those things that I actually really enjoy and really flourish in. I just do because I have to do them.
Yeah. And it would be interesting for people to do that, to actually get in touch with those 15 people and do that as a little exercise. Because I bet you I really like, because often strengths, we think of it as quite a dualistic way. It's either strength or weakness.
Yeah.
Whereas, that whole play on strengths or overdeveloped strengths and things like that. But I really like that whole thought, because there's things that I know that I reckon people would say that I'm good at, but actually it's because I can kind of turn my hand to a lot of things.
You're adaptable, but there'll still be things that you really flourish in.
Yeah.
That I think I would know well enough when we were working together when you're really involved in something. I know when you're absolutely flying at it and you really enjoy it, and other times it feels like you're doing it because you're incredibly good at it, but you're not doing it because you're incredibly good at it and enjoying it. finding the
It
right
feels
sweet spot
different,
for those
doesn't
things.
it?
It does. It's a totally different energy.
Yeah.
It's more of a flow. You're definitely in flow when it's something that's
100%.
both highly challenging and you've got the right energy that you can put towards it.
Yeah.
You're definitely more
No concept of time.
in flow. You don't notice it.
Yeah.
You can just glide your way through it
Yeah.
because you know how easy it is to. And if somebody asks you a tough question about it, you don't have to consciously put too much effort into the answer because you know it so well because it's something you flourish in. It's almost like you can just be you in that moment because you know the stuff that you're really confident at that you do to an incredibly high standard.
I think it's important for people to know as much as they can about themselves and be aware of that because it's not what people tell us, it's about our learning of ourselves. And also because that helps, especially from a leadership perspective, if you're mentioning interviewing, to understand your own unconscious bias for when you are creating a team, to make sure that you have cognitive diversity within a team. So if you understand yourself more, then that's so going to help for you to have that awareness, and then it's a choice in order for you to be more inclusive, because diversity is fact. It's just how inclusive are you. I think that's incredibly important now.
Diversity of thought was one of my clients I was working with. We were working with last week, and there was a whole diversity map that we looked at in terms of all the things that you perhaps don't consider that are considered to be classified as having diversity as a real good quality. And when we're just talking about things like diversity of thinking and how people think, and that whole kind of danger of group thinking when everyone thinks in exactly the same way, what is that kind of bias does that then produce in meetings and in outputs and decision making when people work on things? You end up with these horrible kind of voting strategies when people vote on things as well. But just having that diversity of thought in the room actually provides you with such great insight. It's trying to really understand that and not allowing your kind of biases to get in the way of it as well.
And some of that, it can be sort of hierarchical as well. I always struggle with that word, but I managed it there. You often see people in meetings come in and go, the boss, the chief executive, whoever, come in and says, right guys, I'm really interested in what you think about blah. This is what I think we should be doing, but I'm really interested in what you've got to say. You're basically saying, if you don't, that's someone who I would say doesn't necessarily have a great amount of self-awareness, because they're saying
self-awareness should be the boss goes last.
Or the boss isn't there.
In certain circumstances, if there's a critical incident, this decision needs to be made, a decision needs to be made. But if you're trying to get engagement and you're trying to get buy-in, clarity, consensus into something, you're not going to get buy-in unless you allow people to share their insight and their view. So if you stand up and say, well, I think this, what do you think first? You kind of already setting up what you want people
100%.
to think, but allowing people to come at it from their own angle. I was it's maybe another kind of thing around personal development, but I'm always quite keen to explore with groups is when they try to come at decision making as a team or idea generation, is they should have some isolated time on their own before they share the idea with the group. So they have reflective time, and then they'll share time, and then they have debate time. Rather than going straight into debates, because you'll get people to formulate their own ideas and then share their ideas and then debate their ideas. I think it produces so much more interesting discussion. That as an approach to kind of team communications. Downside is it takes slightly longer, but you end up with a higher quality outcome, and you also end up with greater buy-in, because what you have is everyone's had an opportunity to contribute rather than you've been told how to think and act.
Do you journal or anything like that? Do you use sort of
Yeah, I do quite a lot of boards and things, and I do quite big pictures, so I do mind maps and things quite often, and haven't done in the last 3 months, but I was quite often doing quite a lot of blog writing as well. Now my blog writing is normally quite a lot of personal development stuff based within it, whatever that topic is that I'm focusing my mind on at that point in time, so I'm creating stuff through that as well. But yeah, I will do quite a bit of journaling and mental notes. I use a process every month where I look at the things that I'm focused on most, that I want to get most for myself on. So I use 3Ds in it. I talk about What's the stuff that I need to dump, that I need to start focusing on that's draining my energy? What's the stuff that I need to discover, that I need to go and explore more of? And what's the stuff I absolutely need to do but devour and get absolutely lost on? And I do it as a little mind map every month for myself.
That's good.
I've shared it with a few people as well to encourage them to do the same thing, but it just gives me some clarity, because I think, again, with development, you've got to find a style that works for you.
Yeah.
That I've tried doing it as a really rigid action plan every month, and it doesn't work for me personally. I don't go back to it and I don't use it. I don't put dates on it. I don't. So that kind of, what's my focus for this month?
Yeah.
And quite often what I'll do with that is, once I've sketched out and write all my notes on it, I'll take a photograph of it and have it as my screenshot on my phone for the next month. So I'm building a little reminder. I know Professor Damien Hughes, that we do a little work with at Raised Bar, he talks about tripwires, and that's one of my tripwires for me, definitely, is to have a little visual reminder every single month of the stuff that I really need to focus on. And that keeps me engaged, and the fact that it's visual.
Yeah.
As a visual learner, I know I'm doing something for myself that's visual, rather than trying to force a method of development on myself that doesn't really work. I think doing something that works for my style is definitely a good strategy for me to invest in personal development, is choosing something that works. How do you approach that?
I have a spreadsheet. It's all colour coded.
Taking filters on it.
I don't know how to do that. Pivot. I like Danielle Laporte stuff, which is core desired feelings. So I focus on every week what my core desire. Well, I have core desired feelings, but what am I going to do in order for me to feel the way I want to feel?
Okay.
So every goal that we have is one big fat hairy excuse for us to feel something. So if you work on what the feelings are first and then work backwards.
Right.
So that's what I do, and I've got, like, you usually see me like a pack horse, and I've got like loads of books and everything is ridiculous as I sit here with
Kirsty's bags like W.H. Smith.
Exactly.
Sort of mobile W.H.
I went
Smith.
to my physiotherapist the other day, and my massage therapist, and I jumped into the toilet, and she came out. She was holding my bag and a 16-kilogram kettlebell in the other hand, and she's like, "I'm perfectly balanced." Anyway, that aside, but my diary is a Danielle Laporte diary, so it's like my core desired feelings, and so it's all mapped out that way. Okay. And I do things like I'll listen to podcasts, but because I just hear about them all the time. I go into like a Google vortex, when you hear about something and then brrr, all of a sudden you're watching.
Balance is an interesting thing on that. Is it how you find the balance in amongst things? Because I think there's, well, you use meditation as your approach to. I wasn't really meaning so much, sorry, about
balancing my bags.
Maybe I did mean the same thing. That's just my interpretation. I was just thinking about from a listener's point of view, about how you find the time to do personal development in amongst such a busy working life. Because personal development is our life, because our jobs involve personal development. But we'll go out every day. We might be recording a podcast, we might be delivering a workshop, we might be writing content, we might be designing games, all these different things. It's how do you find the time within it to do the right balance of time of personal development? I think
it's about what people deem to be important. So obviously I think it's really important, so hence the reason I will devour books. Or I'll listen to absolutely.
It's like salad cream and
podcast. I don't like salad cream. Podcast.
Salad cream. When was the last time you tried salad cream?
No, I do not like. I hate it when there's like tuna and salad. Oh no! Well,
you don't salad cream and cafes now either.
Thank goodness.
No, I miss salad cream.
Anyway, that aside. Just to clarify, but I think it's about values. For me, it is so important for me to learn. Like, if I'm not learning, I genuinely feel like my soul has died. So I think it's incredibly important. So I think it's about people not categorizing, but working out what's important to them, understanding their values and their beliefs. And then if it's important to you, you'll find the time. You'll be on the treadmill listening to a podcast, or you'll get like a quick 5-minute reflection time. Some people say, I don't have time to reflect. In that moment you could have reflected. You know, like that was a time to reflect. It doesn't have to be, okay, I'm going to set aside 2 hours of reflection time, because it's just those little points. I remember a meditation teacher saying to me that meditation isn't sitting under a tree cross-legged and, silence in the brain. Osho talks about rest as awareness. Even just saying that, if you're in a meeting, just saying those 3 words, rest as awareness, that's meditation. That brings you into
my
yourself.
bike's my meditation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
100%.
my chill out time is, I don't think about anything on my bike other than just biking. I just get lost in the surroundings.
Yeah.
All the sounds are amplified when I'm doing it. Everything that's surrounding me, I can connect everything together
And I
because I'm out
think
in
that's
space,
important.
but
You need that. And you're probably better in your work. You must feel in your work when you haven't been out on the bike.
Oh yeah, if I haven't been on my bike, or less so on a run, because run's more adrenaline based, but if I'm cycling, if I haven't done that for a good 2 or 3 weeks, which is a long time for me not to be on my bike, I'm not as in tune, I'm not as good at what I'm doing, because I haven't had the space to, if I've been travelling loads, for example, and I've not had time to just go and spend some quality time on your own and reflect. I'm quite fortunate, I live quite near the beach, so it's quite handy for me that I can walk to the bottom of the road and 10 minutes round the corner we've got a beach. So where I live's quite a deliberate choice, that I like having that sea sound around me, because that's part of my personal development, is taking some space. If I'm ever doing creative design pieces, I generally take a notepad and I go and sit down the beach and do it, if the weather's good enough, obviously. But if not, I'll get in the car and just, the rain's coming down, but I've still got the sound of the ocean, because it just helps me to write my best stuff as well.
And I think that is important, as you say. It's the environment, isn't it? It's knowing the environment that's best for you to learn, to be aware, and just pay attention. A lot of the times I'll be with, coaching people, and be the MD or whatever, and just say, I just want you to walk around the office and say nothing.
Yeah.
Say nothing to anyone, and just really notice what you haven't been noticing. And that's good for your own self-awareness, but just to pay attention. I think paying attention to what's going on and how you can work with other people is our role as leaders.
Yeah.
And to know who you are when things aren't going your way.
I would give one other strategy. I would suggest that you, no matter how experienced you are, what age you are, what your experience of personal development is, I always keep a note of everything that I've done historically to look back on the journey that I've travelled on. So I know that I've got folders in my office that I've got CPD notes or images of things that I did my personal development notes when I was 23, 24 years old, and with things in it. It's almost like a little diary of your learning, to look back in those things and see how far you've travelled and what you've done and what you've learned. I mean, we can do that a lot more digitally these days with what you've recorded as well, but I think recording it in some form
So important.
allows you to recognise your pathway of what you're doing and what you're learning and where you're going.
And often at that time, we might have learned something that felt quite transactional, but I will always go back and look at it, because it might be what's relevant for me right now rather than right then. And I know that if I look back in journals, I'm like, who was I when I wrote this? It's just like I need to hear that now, or I need to have that awareness now. And so sometimes it's just, you just got to meet yourself on the page when you're doing these sort of notes, and it might not be what's required for you now, or the writing is, but actually the reading and the understanding of it is a lot later.
Yeah.
And it's important to have them and to look back on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Even just in even a shorter term basis in that, if you put down in the next 3 months what your personal development pathway looks like and the things that you want to learn, is please look back in it and look what you've done and look what you said at the starting point, where you ended up to. Even if where you ended up something quite different that you did by way of personal development, to actually look back on what you said to yourself that you were going to do is really valuable. Because if you don't keep a track of that, you're just heading in any direction that you hope it takes you.
Yeah.
Which to some people, that's personal development itself, is just having something that's got a natural direction. But I still think you should, reflect back on what you suggested you might do in order to help you to move forward successfully.
I agree. So it's observe, I think, you know, we're not saying just formal elements. It's observing what's going on, paying attention,
Be present.
journaling, vision board, whatever that might be, and really take on board the feedback
Yeah.
that people have said.
We've got some tools on the apprenticeship offering, obviously, that people can use those kind of things to log their own learning. Deliberately we always leave quite a lot of white space and blank spaces in workbooks on face-to-face sessions, and that's there for a reason, so that you can take a note and less and less now do action plans at the end of events. I get people to kind of visualise their notes, or at least do some kind of written note of the things that they want to take away and they want to use, rather than just this is what I have to do and here's how I want to do it by. You know, what's your record of personal development that you want to achieve, and what difference is that going to make to you and the people that surround you? Is probably going to be more cohesive than what is it, when's it done by, and who do you need to speak to. It's just something a bit more fluid that works for you. I think you have to find a style within your personal development. That's one of the habits I wish I had learned when I was 21, 22 and looking at CPD. I wish I'd known to know what my habit was and my style was in terms of the best way for me to develop, because I certainly think I just went, give me loads of that, and I probably learned loads from it, but rather than picking the things that were, I was just trying to absorb everything and get really excited by it, but not really choosing things that probably were best suited for me or are most relevant to my career at that point in time.
Cool. Well, I think we should leave them to go and be self-aware.
Cool.